But first, concern is mounting among business groups, farmers and miners that Labor is set to impose even more onerous green tape on them. The Alliance is demanding that Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek give clearer detail on the National Environmental Protection Agency, which effectively is like a green cop, and in particular rule out using a climate trigger. The fear is that Labor could use the creation of a climate trigger as a bargaining chip with the Greens to get legislation over the line, and that could spell the end for so many of the industries that our national prosperity is built upon, not to mention undermining the government's own Made in Australia agenda. So for more on this, let's bring in the Environment Editor at The Australian, Graham Lloyd. Graham, thanks for joining me. Just let's start off so viewers can understand what we actually mean by a climate trigger. Can you explain that for me?
Good evening, James. A climate trigger is an opportunity for the regulator or the government to look at the climate impact of any project in terms of what it would do to Australia's carbon dioxide emissions or other issues that are considered within that package of climate impacts. As things stand, the federal government has quite limited role in deciding major projects under the EPBC. They're confined to things such as World Heritage listings and other things that are federal responsibilities, not states. If you introduce a climate trigger, that expands dramatically the remit of the Commonwealth in having a role in the decision-making process about a whole range of things that it doesn't have now.
So as I said, a whole range of industries and groups are very concerned about this. What's the likelihood that the government will introduce such a trigger? Obviously, the Greens are pushing hard for it.
Well, it's something that the Greens have been wedded to for a long period of time. In fact, the Prime Minister, many years ago, when he was an Environment Minister, he was in favour of this sort of mechanism. Since then, the advice is that these matters in terms of climate impact are taken care of in other ways. But the Greens are going to bargain very hard, and it's a real test for the Albanese government whether it will cave into the Greens' demands, given the loss of votes over to the left and the competition with the Greens that's building for the next election.
Indeed. Well, the irony of all of this, Graham, is that Labor's Future Made in Australia plan relies on the sorts of industries a climate trigger would impact. So it begs the question, if a climate trigger came into effect as a sop to the Greens, would Labor ever be able to realise their Future Made in Australia agenda?
Well, I think the thing you have to consider is the average time it takes to consider anything under the EPBC is 1,000 days. And if you have a situation where practically anything can be referred for review, it'll gum up the works right the way through, and it's a lot more than the Future Made in Australia will have to be worried about.
Just before I let you go, the CEO of Transgrid, Brett Redman, he sought to ease concerns when it comes to the expansion of New South Wales transmission grid. Thousands of kilometres of wires need to be rolled out to connect renewable energy projects, but the company's projects are facing cost blowouts and delays. Now, I reported on Monday that a $2.3 billion energy cable connecting New South Wales and South Australia is facing budget blowouts and taking longer than expected. The Spanish contractor reportedly is late paying its bills and has been so for the past year. So we're not exactly being reassured that these projects are going to come on time without enormous blowouts. And of course, where does that leave us with energy security?
Well, this is the area that would be causing a lot of sleepless nights in the government and industry, that there's a big difference between hope and delivery. And the delivery side of the equation in the whole renewables transition is over budget and behind schedule. And now there's a lot of promises that things can be brought back on track, but it's an experience that's being shared right around the world, including rising costs because of inflation and everybody wanting to do the same thing at the same time. So optimism is good to have, but we really need to see these things delivered to make that a reality.
Yeah, well, if Chris Bowen's optimism kept the lights on, we'd all be fine. But as you said, that's not going to cut it.